All right, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get ourselves situated and get going. Good evening. My name is Jen Swendeman. I am the 2025 president of the Northern Kentucky Association of Realtors. It's my honor to have you all here tonight. Thank you for joining us. This is our presentation, Building on Raw Land, Site Selection to Shovel. Just for a little bit of show of hands, and I think to help our panel understand who we're working with here, this is for Realtor members and consumers as well. Can you raise your hand as a Realtor member, and then raise your hand as a consumer? Awesome. Okay, very good. Well, we're thrilled to have you here. We're looking forward to hearing from our panel of experts. And this presentation is made possible through a consumer outreach grant from the National Association of Realtors, and it will be recorded and made available after the presentation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to just pass the microphone on down. First, I'm going to ask each member to introduce themselves. Excuse me. Tell us a little bit about kind of, where they work and just a quick snippet of their part of the process, and then we'll ask some more specific questions after that.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I have a pretty loud mouth. So I'm Kevin Costello. I'm the Executive Director of the Boone County Planning Commission. I have a staff of 15 people. We're responsible to review all development in Boone County. We only have 3 cities, which is great. And then the unincorporated areas. So we have a one-stop shop building permit as well as a zoning permit. We're in the same building, same floor, literally a couple steps away, so you can get everything all at once in our building. So been there a few years. I'm here representing the Planning Commission. However, our chief building official, Paul Stevenson, couldn't make it, so I'm here kind of subbing for him. I'll try to answer some of his questions, but believe me, I'm not a building person. He deals with structures, I deal with land, so but we do work together. So
Hi, I'm Chris Edwards. I'm with the Kentucky Department for Public Health. I'm the on-site sewage supervisor for the state. Bob and I have worked together for decades.
Yeah. So I'm Bob McCandless. I work for the Northern Kentucky Health Department for about 25 years. Known Chris all 25 of them. We cover 4 county districts, so we're pretty well call number 1 if you need to install a septic system on the property. And in rural land, you will need that. So that's what our role is, and that's what I do.
All right. I'm going to turn that off. Oh, is it? Okay, yeah, it's on. Good evening. My name's Rob Ziegler. I'm with Ziegler & Schneider. We're attorneys located out on Buttermilk Pike in Crescent Springs, and I've been practicing 35 years now. Practice in transactional law, lease negotiations, contract negotiations, real estate, estate planning, that type of thing. And I'm also I'm happy to be the attorney for the NKAR and the MLS, so I have the privilege of working with Janie on their issues. And also here, so I'll be talking about legal issues, but also I recently built on my own land out in Petersburg within the last 2 years, so I'll be talking some about that too.
I'm Leslie Raschulte. I'm with Heartland Bank. We were formerly Victory Community Bank, so if you're more familiar with them. We worked a lot for many years with Fisher Homes, but I specialize in construction loans. We're kind of known a little bit more for them, so that's why I'm here.
Hello, I'm Mike Kegley, one of the co-owners of the Bolt Company, a custom builder. Many of you in here have cashed a co-op check from me over the last 39 years, and I'm glad to pay those. So we've always got our checkbook out when you've got a client. We build in all 5 Northern Kentucky counties, and then 2 over in Indiana. I have to get, each of these people have to do something before I can even start your house, and we'll be talking about some of those details and things as we go along here as well.
I'll stand, and that way we don't have to pass it all back and forth that way. So you alluded to the fact that there's a whole lot of things that have to go on before you can get started. So if we're talking about a consumer who already has a piece of property, they've held on to it for a while, now they're getting ready to build, What's our first step? Who starts first with that? Is it lending? Is it planning and zoning? Is it health department? Where do we start? And then I'm going to let that person kind of take the reins first and kind of describe your part of the process.
First thing anybody ought to do is get pre-qualified for a loan. The last thing, if somebody's buying a lot, they come to me and say, hey, I've got money down on the lot for 3 weeks. Can I build a 4-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house with a 4-car garage and a pool? I said, well, I can't tell you that in 3 weeks, it's that type of thing. So I always encourage everybody to pre-qualify for their mortgage loan at a monthly payment they're comfortable with. If you don't own a lot, you need to take that budget and set 20% aside, and this is what I'm going to spend on my lot, my septic system, my utilities, and my driveway. If you already have the lot, then you need to check the zoning on the lot, which Kevin will talk about, and get pre-approved for a septic system. The septic guy gets first choice because where your septic system goes has to be in good drainable soil, hopefully enough topsoil there, or if not, topsoil could be hauled in. But he gets first choice, and then the home site gets second choice.
Okay. With that, Leslie, will you describe some of the steps that people need to take as far as getting pre-approved and ready to go on a construction loan?
So a lot of times when people call us, the first thing they ask is, we need to build a home. Either they own their land or they don't. And sometimes we will do a construction loan with the purchase of the land and the house at the same time if they have everything together. So the big thing with construction loans, for us to really move forward, we have to have an idea of the cost and a contract from the builder with their plans and specs, because that's how the appraisal is based on what the house is going to be once that house is built. And that's how we base our construction loan. Years ago, most lending with construction loans required at least 20% down. That is not the case anymore with construction, which is really nice. We do use the land value depending on how long they've owned it, and we can also pay that loan and roll that in. But I usually start with them, try to get an idea how much they think they are going to spend or what they're comfortable spending. We get them approved, kind of go over the different products that are available to them. And then they go to their builder, kind of sit down with them and get numbers. And then they usually come back to say, hey, we need to readjust our numbers some. And then we'll kind of look at it and make sure that's something we can do. The other scenario we're kind of running into now is a lot of people want to be able to build but not sell their current home. They don't want to have to move twice, which we can help with that too. We kind of go a little bit higher on the debt to income ratios in those situations to help them get them into the house first before they sell. So that's some other options that we look at.
Thank you. That's great. I'm going to go to building at this point, since that's kind of a big part of the process as well. So, Mr. Costello, can you kind of help us understand, if a consumer is coming to you, what their first steps are with you?
Sure. So, again, I always recommend take the path of least resistance. Don't be too much of an entrepreneur. I know a lot of people would love. Is this on?
It is.
Okay. Most people would like to do everything on their own, but really building a house is a little bit more than that. Again, I would look at who's going to build it, who's capable of building it, and really handling the project. But from my end, you have to pick an area, and a lot of times people want to live in subdivision. That's pretty easy, because there's a developer there waiting for you. But if you're in the rural area, you have to make sure that, a lot of different things that come into play. There's, all the rural areas zoned, it's either A1 or A2, that's 5-acre lot sizes, or 2-acre lot sizes. There's other smaller sizes, but you have to make sure that you have enough land to build the house, that you meet zoning requirements. And you also have to have access to a public street. Or in some cases, there may be an opportunity to do private streets, depending on where you're located, or you're on a state road or something like that. Whatever road you pick, you obviously have to get an encroachment permit, and that's in order to get access to that road, that the access is safe. And so those are simple things. From our end, again, there's a lot of tools out there that you can look into. You know, we have aerial photography. If you go to our GIS, our website, and there's a handout that I provided that has all sorts of information on their website, address, phone numbers of people. But you have to look at where you want to place the house. There's minimum front yard, rear yard, side yard setbacks, etc. That deals with that. And again, if you're looking at a large piece of property, you know, the larger the site, the better off you are in terms of staying away from your neighbors, as well as meeting all the setback requirements. But it's the zoning permit is simply to make sure you meet all the regulations, that you have the lot frontage, you meet all the setbacks. And we have to issue the address. We don't issue addresses. A lot of people try to fake their address. We're the ones that issue the address, so don't get in the habit of doing that. We have people that try to do that, and it's a boondoggle because we're responsible for issuing the addresses for the 911 system. And if there's a mess up, someone's lives could be in jeopardy. But so we issue them, and obviously we'll issue that for construction purposes. But you come in and get the zoning permit, you get that approved by us. At the same time, you apply for your building permit in the building department. And again, they go through a similar procedure, but they do inspections, and that goes with the territory. And we share information. We give them a copy of the permit, and obviously they're out there numerous times checking on you, checking on the work, you know, some of the excavation, and I know we'll get into utilities and so forth. One thing about the building department is obviously they have to make sure if you're out in the rural area and you're going with septic tanks, there has to be a piece of paper that shows that you have access to a sanitary system. Even though it's private, you have to show that, you have to prove that. You also have to prove that you have the encroachment permit. So each little agency may have their own little permit, but you got to keep those together and provide that information. We have, it usually takes up to 7 days to do it. We usually turn around 2 or 3 days. They're pretty easy. Building permit's a little bit longer because they're looking at detailed drawings of the building, of the structure, so that takes a little bit longer than us. But again, we're here to answer any questions that you have. Sometimes you have a difficult site. It may be a hillside or something like that, or there's an old pond, or there's a spring or something. You want to stay away from that stuff. I always say, get to know your property really well. If you're buying something, make sure you ask people, ask the neighbors what's been there in the past. Ask those silly questions just to make sure. Sometimes your neighbors are your best source of information, or else anyone else that lives in the area. If you're new to the area and don't really know the lay of the land where you like to live, again, ask people. You have to find out where you want to live. What's the priority of the land? If you have kids, what schools and all that stuff. So that all rolls into the decision-making process. The permit's very simple. It's $95. It's the best bargain. We haven't raised that permit fee since 2008, unlike our neighboring counties. And that's for a house. And that you have up to 2 years to use that permit for that house. You can make changes and so forth, and we'll review all that. But it's pretty easy. That's probably, I'll stop there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Chris, can you speak to, you touched on septic and making sure that all of that documentation is in order. Can you go ahead and speak to kind of that part of the process?
Sure. If Bob gives me an elbow, it's because I said something that don't apply in Northern Kentucky. So I'm really glad he's here. My program's got a statewide program. It's been around since 1986. So there's still things out there in the ground that were put in before there was rules. It pretty much goes, it's a 120 county code. Everybody's got to obey it. The local health departments can make it more strict, but they can't relax anything. And so we train all the environmentalists. They're all college educated with at least 24 hours of science. And we train them for a week at University of Kentucky. Then they come to us in Frankfurt for a week. Then we train them out in the field 5 times, and then we get them all together again for a week. and then a year later, we fully certify them. So it's a pretty rigorous process. The basic starting point is when you buy a piece of property is your site evaluation. For you guys' purposes, being realtors, that's going to be the most important thing of it to y'all. And it is completely dependent on the soil, to be completely honest. I mean, like I use the line all the time, I didn't put the dirt here, because people get very upset because they think you're making this up. But if you've got good soil, then you're pretty much good to go. But if you've got really bad soil, Bob and I can make it work. Our job, what I tell the new people is, it's our job to get people where they want to be legally. And that's how we approach our job, and we take it pretty serious. It could be something as simple, let me go back to it. So you would come down, you have to have a drawing. You have to have a drawing of your property. Do y'all need plot plans up here?
Yeah.
See, I started out in Bowling Green, and you have to have an engineered plot plan in Bowling Green, which is cool. So then when I went to work for the state and got in these counties, and it was just like a circle and an X where the house goes, and I was like, you can't do that. And they're like, slow your roll. Yes, they can. So, but here in Northern Kentucky, just like Bowling Green, you kind of got lucky. You have to have a plot plan.
Well,
And
we can get it started with just a drawing, but before
Okay.
we issue a permit, we'll need the plot plan.
okay, cool. So yeah, in case you didn't hear there, the microphone needs it. He said you can get started with a hand drawing in Northern Kentucky, but eventually you're going to have to get a plot plan. So you get your drawing of your property, you come to the health department and apply for what's called a site evaluation. It's not a perk test. Perk tests are illegal now for a really, really good reason. So you come to the health department with your drawing, and we're going to, you do affidavits here? Mm-hmm. So you do owner's affidavit, where the owner will come in and say, I'm at this many bedrooms, whether or not I have a garbage disposal, how big my land is, the address, and all that good stuff. And then at some point, an environmentalist from the health department will come out, and they're going to look at your 42 inches of soil. Okay, and they're going to evaluate that soil based on texture and structure and signs of wetness. I can't believe in 27 years I've never put an auger in the ground in Northern Kentucky. So you've got counties that are really lucky, that just have great soil. Simpson County is the easiest job in 120 counties because everything's 24 inches deep and puppy dogs and rainbows. And then you've got terrible places like Muhlenberg County, Butler County, lots of counties that have what's called a fragipan. So what we're looking for is something that's causing water not to drain. And that is when we call them restrictions. And then when we find that restriction, then Bob and I have a multitude of things we can do to beat that restriction, none of which are cheap. So that's why Bob and I, in our career, have never got a Christmas card. We're pretty disliked. But we don't do it because we think it's a great idea. We're literally evaluating the soil and how hydraulically that water is going to travel through the soil, and not for a week, but for 30 years, hopefully. So then once the health department comes out and does your site evaluation, you can take that piece of paper and get an estimate from a certified installer in Kentucky. And then at that point, your installer will lay the system out with a laser or a transit, and then they will make a very detailed drawing, bring it into the health department, issue a permit. That's it. Then they put it in, and the easiest part is we come out and do the final inspection, which is really simple, unless it's wrong. Then you get called bad names. But, so yeah, that's the basics of the program here in Kentucky.
That's great. Bob, would you like to elaborate on?
Yeah, so like Chris said, with the septic permit, I know in Boone County and a lot of the other northern counties, you need that septic permit. Mr. Costello mentioned it, to get like the building permit, the zoning permit, your plumbing permits. It all is relied on that septic permit. So it really is the most, important permit getting started, because, you have a plan, you're not going to build a house with no plan for any sanitation, that you have no options. So that all gets taken care of first. And so to what Chris said, we'll do a site evaluation, but that doesn't mean, we approve a lot. We approve an area. So the first person, applies for a site evaluation, ends up not building, 2 years later, somebody else gets it and want to build on another part of the property, then that doesn't mean that it's going to pass over there. You see what I'm saying? So just because the area is approved doesn't mean the whole lot's approved.
Bob, you might want to explain to them about fill and wake, lagoons, and package treatment plants.
Yeah, well, like Chris said, these not real cheap options. We can overcome, site limitations as such as poor soil, complex topography, just whatever the limitation may be. Most of our systems in northern Kentucky go in somewhat shallow, like 12 inches to 14 inches, some even shallower. So they bring soil in to put over top of them. In situations where there is no suitable soil or not deep enough suitable soil to pass the evaluation, they can always create an area and have soil brought in. It's called a fill and wait. And so they create the area, and where the waiting time, it has to settle for 1 year before they can install the septic system. But after the area is created and approved, they can go ahead and apply for a holding tank permit to use during that 1 year settling permit. And then there's other systems too, like Mike said, the lagoon. We do those in a lot of the more rural counties, like we do a lot of them in Grant County. And it's a system is basically you have a septic tank, and then just the water from the septic tank goes into an absorption pond that gets evaporated by the sun. And the water from the septic tank goes to the bottom of this pond-like structure, and then it'll have a small overflow coming off of it. But it's really a good system if you've got a place to put one. And like I said, we do a lot of those in Grant County. And then, there is other advanced, treatment type system. The drip systems are becoming a little bit more popular statewide. Other systems, the Kentucky Division of Water also offers a couple systems if we cannot offer you anything at all for whatever reasons, lot size or whatever. But that's, they permit those type of systems, but it could be an option for you. So there's usually an option. Sometimes it's not always a cheap option, but there's usually some sort of an option to overcome a lot limitation.
Just a quick question. How does it work in terms of expiration of a permit? So, for example, if I get the site evaluation, but I decide not to build right away, is it good for 2 years as long as it's the same site, same location?
Well, we
You go ahead.
Yeah. So
It's tricky from county to county.
yeah, so we do our sites for 5 years.
Okay.
Is the way we do them. I think now if it's the same owner, nothing's changed or everything.
Sites or permits?
Sites. But then the permits are good for 1 year.
Okay.
Now, if something happens, they get a late start on the build, they can potentially extend the time. Or, if they just totally drop the ball, then they'll just have to get another permit.
Right.
But it's, the permit is not a real difficult to get once the site's been approved and the installer's been out there and all that.
Oh, I have another follow-up question for you. You had mentioned some areas, I don't know if it's regional, like Muhlenberg is really bad. Traditionally, up here, Boone County, are we in the middle, average, or we have pretty good success on those tests?
Yeah, so Boone County is one of our better counties of the 4-county district. We've got a lot of fragipan type soil, but the good news about it is it's deep fragipan, so it's usually 2 foot or deeper, so we can overcome that. We do have a lot of areas around Burlington, Hebron with the high water table area that Chris was talking about with the wetness in the soil, that we had to install other components in the system, like that's called a curtain drain to lower that water table. But then like the other areas, like around like the Big Bone Park area, that's a lot of clay. Those sites get pretty tough down in there. But for the most part, Boone County is pretty good county for soil.
I got a question. What's the minimum amount of land you need to put a septic tank in?
Well, the local zonings, what's it here?
We don't have anything now.
Okay, so I'm sorry. The state standard is you have to have enough room to put a system in, and 100% of that system or equivalent, depending on width, somewhere else on the land. That's the state standard. So if you've got I'm just for giggles going to throw some numbers out. If you've got 3 lines, if you need 3 4-foot by 90 lines prescribed, then you have to have enough room to put that exact system or something that's mathematically equivalent, because you can get a reduction the wider you go. You can use a different aggregate in the line. So it needs to be that exact system or the equivalent somewhere on the lot. Now, here's where it gets dicey. Now, that's what we call repair area. That repair area doesn't have to be perfect. It could be solid rock, because the thinking is if push came to shove, we could do a fill and wait and make that repair area. Y'all don't have this problem up here because I've known Bob for 20 years. I'm not going to kiss his behind, because you've got everybody's from this area, right? You got the best health department in the state right here, okay? It can be a problem when some health departments overreach a little and they say, well, you've got repair area, but the soil's terrible. That's a no-go, okay? So many municipalities that have a planning and zoning, they'll set a minimum size of either a half acre or an acre, or then you got Fayette County where it's 10 acres. You can't have a septic system in Lexington unless you have 10 acres. Would anybody like to guess why? They don't want to bust them horse farms up. They don't want daddy to die and their kids put a bunch of houses on it, so that's why that is. But anyway, so yeah, there is a standard depending on where you live. If there's not a planning and zoning, they probably don't have a standard. And in that case, it falls back to me where you need enough room for your system and 100% repair area.
Well, we don't regulate based on zoning. We rely on the health district to do that. It's
perfect.
subject to the soil conditions.
Yeah, like I live in Bowling Green, the Warren County planning and zoning, it's 1 acre.
Yeah.
And you can go the next county over, it's a half acre. And then when you get farther west than that, it's whatever.
The only thing is, in theory, you could have 1 acre of bad soil, right?
Not in theory.
Well, I know.
Pretty easy. The main thing that, and I'm not going to talk about this all night. I think I turned this off.
No, I think it's fine.
No, I'm good. The main thing is realtors that, especially if any of y'all are developers, that would interest you is what's called decentralized or cluster systems. These things are catching on. And what it is it's one big system. Last one I did, and I forget, Western Kentucky, was 89 homes all on one septic system. It's a total economic thing. It's right where you guys eat. It's I just keep talking about Warren County because that's where I live. Warren County's a 1 acre minimum lot size, right? So builders and developers and realtors are starting to figure out, if I got 100 acres and after planning and zoning gets done with my roads and my setbacks and all that, I can build 65 houses, sell them for $20,000, $30,000 a piece. Wouldn't you rather get about 200 or 300 homes on that and sell them for $25,000 or $30,000 a piece? Yes, all of y'all love that. And everybody wins in that situation too, by the way. But what they do is they'll put one system in sized for every home and the repair area, and then the rest of it, the planning and zoning, because they've already taken care of their wastewater treatment and repair area. I don't speak for planning and zonings, but most of them say, okay, you can have a 1/4 acre lot then. So then you can really double and triple your land that you have available for sale with the decentralized or cluster system. It's been around a long time. I don't know why it hadn't caught on. But yeah, and we're trying to, actually I need to speak to you offline. I need to get in with the realtors and developers to give that class because I don't think a lot of people know it's out there. And
So when that seller would go to sell that house, it's on a community septic system.
yes, sir.
That's what it's called.
Yeah, and there has to be, there's a lot to it, but there has to be a management entity in place. I can give you 4 or 5 really good ones that work like a charm. The truth is 95% of them are HOAs and they're a nightmare, but they're legal. And I don't make laws, so if they're legal, I'll allow it.
Well, just a side note, Northern Kentucky's really pushing public sewer. Bottom line, we have treatment plants. We've built 2 new ones, so they pretty much push public sewer, and so
That's on them.
the option is, and we looked into that, some of that in rural areas, that what you're describing, and no developers taking advantage of that from the standpoint of that size.
Yeah.
And we've had other ones that are small.
The best example of it I can tell you is on Lake Barkley in Eddyville. This is actually funny, and I'll shut up. I'm here for everybody. I'm a neutral party, but it just kind of works out 90% of my work is with the local health departments. But if a homeowner or a realtor has a problem, you can call me. I have 5 people throughout the state that are totally there to take y'all's calls if you think you're getting a bad deal. And we take objectivity very seriously. But anyway, this guy calls me. He wanted to do a cluster system on Lake Barkley, okay? And the locals flipped out and lost their mind. And he did what's called advanced treatment and drip irrigation. When it comes out of this, it looks exactly like that bottle of water. I've seen it, it works. And they do very small half-inch tubes. Anyway, that's getting in the weeds. So then they had a planning and zoning hearing, and the developer asked me, he's like, will you come be on my side? And I was like, wow, this is kind of weird. I've never done this before. Because the health department was like, nope, we're not doing this. It's new, it's scary, we're not doing it. And so I went down there, and I was literally on the side of the table with the realtor and the developer, and they were not listening. The local Board of Health, the planning and zone, they were not listening. They were like, nope, we don't want nothing to do with this. So they took a break, and I went outside with the developer, and he was a smoker, and he was smoking, and I'm like, man, I'm really sorry about this. I know you put a lot of effort into it, but they're not going to let this happen, bro. And he just laughed, and he goes, oh, yeah, they are. He goes, watch this. And so we win. This is when I learned a lesson about y'all's side of the pond. And so then we go in the room, and he's got a PowerPoint that they've already said no to, by the way. And so he starts flicking through his slides, and he said, he goes, I'm selling these lots for $75,000 a piece your way. So I'll sell 10 lots. He goes, my way, I'm going to sell 45 lots at $170,000 a piece. And then his next slide, he goes, and this is your tax base. Hand to God, they said, could you give us a minute? And so they went out, and I stayed at the table because that's my habit. And they're like, nope, you too. And I don't know what they said, but we came back then. They're like, hey, it's a real pleasure doing business with you. Welcome to Kentucky. Guy was out of Atlanta. And it's there right now. It's been in 15 years. I've never had one complaint. It's still spitting out drinking water. So the technology has really changed. It's not rock and pipe anymore, especially for you guys with imagination and financial backing. If you ever have any questions about this, give me a call. I can talk about it till the cows come home.
How much would that type of system cost like for 85 homes? Or
Oh, a lot.
A lot.
I'm going to be real honest with you. I'm not being smart out.
Yeah.
I never ask. Because, like I said, we take objectivity very seriously. So I never ask. You want me to have this?
Oh, sorry.
You're still on.
This thing's got a heck of a safety. The question was, how much would that cost? And the honest answer is, I never ask. Now, I did see a pretty large advanced treatment drip irrigation system go in, and when the engineer out of California, I think, submitted the plans to me, I saw the price tag, and it was $1.2 million. But he made a lot more than that.
That's great insight. Thank you so much. You have insight on that?
Just a real quick bit of advice. When you list lots or property for sale, it would be a great advantage if you got the site evaluation done before it goes on the market. Because anybody that buys your property knows they've got to get one done. It's money out of their pocket, not the and then what is the seller gain? Nothing, And if he finds out that a septic system won't work, well, then he needs to know that before they put it on the market. So that's one of my biggest headaches when we go off site, is to have the seller have that tested. Now we may end up putting it somewhere else, but at least we know we can put one on there someplace.
100% correct.
Thank you for that. That was actually one of my questions. I wanted to give Rob a chance to talk about some of the legal, questions that consumers need to be prepared for and think about. But I think just rolling off of what you just said, my other question is, as realtors working with consumers, we, come across a client, we're referred to a client, we get a phone call, they want to build. What's the best way that realtors working with you, each of you, how can we best prepare our consumers? What's our first conversation? What's our first step that we need to kind of be considering with them? So if you'll talk to that, and then Rob, if you want to hand the microphone to Rob and he can talk about some legal aspects, please.
Well, I would say the first thing is we want to find out what kind of home they're looking for and what kind of general budget they are, and then where they want to build. Some people want 5 acres and not a foot less. Others just want an acre. Everybody wants that 5-acre wooded lot. And I always tell all of them, when you find one, if you find 2, I'm going to take one of them. So, they're just not out there all the time. But that would be the first thing is first of all, pick a builder. You can talk to them more than one. You want a builder that's going to pay your co-op fee, and then you want somebody that's going to work with your buyer on a new home.
Some legal considerations, we started talking about initially when you're looking for property, determining whether you want to buy it and or if you own your own property. If you own your own property, we talked about there's going to be zoning limitations and limitations like that on the use of your property. And you probably know, if you own it already, whether or not there's any other private restrictions. That's something we typically check on and make sure that from the private sector, land can be restricted through the zoning, and then privately through private restrictions and restrictive covenants. So if you own your own land, you probably know, or you should know, whether or not you have any kind of private restrictions. And usually if you're building and you have acreage, you're not going to run into any other than you can't build an outside privy. But other than that, you're probably going to be okay. Now, if you're buying a lot in a subdivision, that's a whole another matter. You are going to have private restrictions that you all know are going to be imposed by the developer. Those are going to affect what you can do on the property over and above what zoning is going to restrict you from doing. And typically, I always think it's a good idea to find out what those are ahead of time, just because of everyone's unique situation. Even like in a subdivision, you look at them and you figure you're going to comply with everything. But in my instance, I bought in a subdivision one time, and one of my hobbies happens to be ham radio, and I wanted to put up an antenna, and zoning law allowed me to put up a pretty high antenna, but I found out later under the restrictive covenants in the subdivision there that I couldn't have an antenna higher than 10 feet above the highest part of my roof. So, if that was an important, really, really, really my main hobby and important to me, I would have really been disappointed had I, would have looked at the restrictive covenants ahead of time. But, again, barring, having your own property, you're not going to really run into any restricted covenants. You're going to have easements, possibly. If you're looking to build and you find out you got 100-foot transmission line coming through here, and that's where you want to put your house, that's going to cause you a problem. But otherwise, if you are buying a piece of property, if there's somebody selling off 10 acres, you would want to do, as you all know, a title exam ahead of time to determine whether or not that property is going to be adequate for you, and you're going to be able to do what you want to do. Those are relatively cheap. Just these days you can get it for $300. Just to check it out ahead of time, it's worth it. Just to see what might cause you a problem down the road. And so that's as far as on the very front end, where the legal considerations might come into play. A little bit later, where you first are going to look at some legal consideration. I don't know if you won't get into yet, but you're going to have to contract with the builder, and the builder is going to have a contract. He's going to have his standard form, and you're not going to read it, or if you read it, you might not exactly understand it. But it really is important to have a lawyer take a look at it, and the contract's going to be $200, $300, $500 million. It's going to be the biggest purchase you're going to make, and you're going to want to take a look at the contract, know what's in it. And really, it's not as much from the standpoint of I'm going to negotiate with the builder and break him down over this term or that term. But what I do when I look at them, and when I did my own, I looked at and advised the homeowners of what kind of provisions are in there that they probably didn't know about and are surprised about. Time limits, and I'll make them a little summary, and like time limits that you got to be, aware of. You have to find out what certain costs are going to, who's paying for what. It avoids surprises like that once you get down the road, had you known about them in advance, you would have provided for them, or you would have thought it through further. Change orders, or a little change or something like that, you find out that they might give you a few free, but then they're going to charge you $200 for a change. If it requires some additional engineering, they're going to charge you the engineering. If it's additional materials and the materials went up in the meantime, you're going to pay for that too. So it's learning about those things and making as many decisions as you can ahead of time on the contract side. And like I said, it's your biggest investment that you're going to make and your biggest purchase. And for not a whole lot of money, just to have legal review take a look at it, just to let you know if there's any really important and kind of things you wouldn't expect to be in there, because you'll get surprises. And even me, when I went through it just 2 years ago, there were surprises. And I read through it, and you can't anticipate all the things that are going to happen. But it's, you can avoid a lot of problems and, a lot of expense as well. And last of all, you don't want to get stuck somewhere in the process. You're building their house and you get into an argument with the contractor, and you're usually in worse shape than he is. You got a contract on your other house to sell it. You're held in limbo. Your interest rate's going higher as you delay. So, you don't want to get into that spot, and, good contract review ahead of time will hopefully avoid those.
Rob, could you address private drives and some with agreements and some without?
A little bit, on private drives, and this somewhat gets into zoning as far as what you're permitted to have private drive-wise, and whether it's an easement, whether it's a flag lot. I know they are going to, every lot's going to have access, and if it's a private drive, there's going to have to be a maintenance agreement on it. The people are obviously going to have access to it, but it also doesn't get public service. So when it snows out there, nobody's going to come out and shovel your streets. And I don't know if they pick up garbage or not on private streets or not, but it's another consideration. But it's always best. I mean, it'd be best to be on a private street. On a public street. The private street's not going to have. Typically, they're not going to have sidewalks, or it's not going to be up to the spec that the public street's going to be. But in some cases, where that you have to make do, then I guess that's the next choice.
I'm seeing a lot of these old lots.
Yep.
I'm seeing a lot of these old lots. The one the other day, there's probably a mile-long road shared by 12 people, and there's no written agreement or anything, And so I'm just telling somebody this is going to be a big problem. Could be a big problem down the road. The neighbor on the one end get mad at you. They block the road, and there's nothing nothing easy to do about it. So.
Yeah, the banker's the problem.
Yeah, we're the problem when it comes to that. So if there's a maintenance not a maintenance agreement in place, we're going to want to see one. And if we have to get all 12 parties involved to sign it before closing, we're going to make sure that happens, because we just don't want to put someone in a situation where they're the ones responsible to fix it that we did the loan for.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Because those circumstances arise from happening a long time ago, wouldn't get through now, but the banks are kind of a good catch-all to when you go to refinance, they'll pick it up and they'll say you don't have access. They'll clean up the problem, hopefully, because if they end up owning it, they're not going to have adequate access.
The only thing I would say too, there is a big difference between a construction loan and then if we're just doing the end loan once the house is done. So a lot of bigger builders don't require construction loans. So the only thing we're doing at that point is just doing the house when it's completed. So things can change. When you're closing on a construction loan, everything's done up front. We hope there's no change to that price, because what happens, if we've already closed and put so much into an escrow account for construction and it changes, guess who's responsible for it? It's not us, it's the buyer. They have to pretty much come, or the person building the house, they have to come up with that difference. It's really hard to go back and modify that construction loan at that point. Now, we've done it. on certain situations, but that's the biggest difference between one that we actually have to do a construction loan on.
I'll make one more comment and then give it over to Kevin there. But yeah, on the financing, one other financing, because from my own experience, I built out on our farm, we have 140 acres out in Petersburg, and instead of doing construction loan or any kind of finance, they actually took title to the property and then built on the property. And then when we ended up closing, they transferred it back. So, you know, they had security in, you know, because they owned the land. But at the same time, I didn't have any finance costs, didn't have to get a construction loan. So that worked out good. It was a little uncomfortable though. It was our family, it was our family farm from like the early 70s and transfer, you know, it was one tract. I couldn't parcel off the 5 acres where the house was. So I passed the whole thing over to them, and fortunately they gave it back, but it was a little funny.
So, let me see here. Here we go.
You're on.
I'd just like to add on the private streets. When I first started, I noticed there were these passways. You know, I was trying to figure out what it was. Did it go back to the Civil War or what? You know, some of these old, particularly in the rural area. And what we were finding that there's very little documentation. They kind of share the costs. You know, whoever's got money throws it in. You know, and it's horrible the way it's set up. And we've always advised people, you better do something about that. And we have we've always told them, well, the bank's going to want something. You know, we've always kind of used them as leverage. A lot of times they've kind of come back and said, yeah, you're right, the bank wants us to do this. But we realize that in the rural area, you know, putting in a public street's very expensive, particularly as it relates to topography and so forth. And there should be other options. And the elected officials at the time said, hey, listen, Kevin, we want you to come up with something that makes sense, that's doable, reasonable, and, you know, a shared responsibility. So we did that. You can create a private street. It's got to be a legal document. It shows ownership to all the lot owners. There's only a certain number of lots that can serve that. It's a minimum spec. And so everyone has ownership and easement or rights to it, and it works out pretty well. And we've had situations where, you know, that document where it didn't exist years ago, but, you know, was created, you know, 10 years ago, has been challenged in court and has worked out well. All the property owners. There's always fights on property owners. You know, there's always going to be that, especially when people move in and move out. And, you know, what maybe started to be a nice little community, people move out. And then you get someone else in there that doesn't want to pay the money and all that stuff, and there's got to be legal remedies.
These are all great insights. Thank you very much. We do have just about 10 minutes or so left. I want to make sure and get to the audience and get a couple specific questions if anyone has those. And then we'll kind of see where that gets us, how close we get to 7 o'clock. So, Greg?
On the site evaluations, will you talk about what the property owner, what they have to prepare the land for you to go do the site evaluation? What do they have to do, clear it and holes and stuff?
Rob, is that you?
Yeah. So, especially in the summertime, it's best that the lot be mowed so we can see the topography, how everything lays. And so, you know, a lot of times we'll require a backhoe pit as well, just on lots that we've dug and just can't get deep enough to see what the soil is going to be. So some lots, you know, may require a backhoe pit, but we do require that the lot be cleared off. If it's a wooded lot, sometimes that's a little easier said than done, but, you know, if you can just brush something down so we can, you know, look in an area and see where the system could lay, that's good enough. But yeah, it does need to be cleared out and stuff, and especially in the summertime.
And flag out your house and your utilities. Yeah.
Other questions? We just want to be able to hear you.
You'd said earlier that the first step of the process was the plot plan. Who does that? The surveyor or surveyor? Yes. Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. Other questions?
So say you had your site evaluated and it passed, and you got the holes in the ground, you got the little flags stuck up, you got a map drawn, and a year or two goes by, you lose the flags. What's the plan for, how do you know where that evaluation was set and approved at?
Get my steps in today.
Back all that I missed. All right, so when me and all of the health departments around the state are supposed to do, when we do a site evaluation, we're also supposed to make a drawing of where that approved area is at, and that will be attached with our copy of the site evaluation that we have on file. We have them for years on file right there at the health department. And so if the flags get moved or whatever, if you want to just give us a call, we can. If it's the same area, nothing's changed, we can go out there and easily identify that area.
You don't use GPS at all?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We use GPS, but also the septic records that Bob's talking about is the local health department has to keep them forever. Can't get rid of them, so they should be there.
Any other questions from the audience? There you are.
What if you have active or seasonal running water, stream, creek, whatever, either on the property, maybe it's there but you don't have to cross it, or if you do have to cross it, it's between the property and the road kind of thing. If anybody has any advice on that.
Septic?
Just if you have to cross a creek in order to get to a home site, or where the septic's
Yeah.
going to be.
So the short answer, you have to figure out what type of creek it is. If you're saying a blue line stream, that's a little different than a little creek. So it kind of depends on what you're going to be. There's two things. One is setbacks. So is there a floodway issue? Is there a flooding issue? And we have published maps and so forth. The other thing is if you're crossing the creek to get to the building site, maybe that's what your question is. Then you have to size the pipe and deal with the crossing, whether you need permits for that or not for division of water. It kind of depends on the size of the creek, the bottom line. And so typically what you do is on your zoning permit, you'd show all that information. You'd show the creek and where you're going. If you're putting a road over the creek, then we'll want to know what type of creek it is. If it's a little babbling brook or something like that versus a real stream. I always say kind of stay away from them. They're good to look at and be by, but when you start dealing with flooding and all that, you don't want to deal with that as much as possible. So, but your building site might be the best site as you cross the creek. Maybe it's it's elevated and you got a great view of something. So
That's great. Anything else? All right. Oh, yes, sir.
One quick, it's going to piggyback off of that. Yeah. So, yes, in my neighborhood, I've got a neighbor that has a creek. They're right next door to the creek. There's an existing bridge that's there, but I don't know that it's sized correctly. There's some issues with flooding.
pedestrian bridge?
No, this is a bridge to. Yes, it's a real bridge for cars, and there are maybe 12 to 16 homes back on this street, and Lookout Farm is the neighborhood. So in a situation like that, I guess the question is, if say I'm representing this client, right, and they are in talks with the county, I guess it is, and negotiating to, hey, we might need some more of your land. How does a process like that kind of play out? I mean, I think your question was like, if you just have some raw land and there's a seasonal creek or something like that, what do you do? But what if it's already existing and there's a bridge there? What are the kind of the remedies, and how aggressive is the county versus the homeowner, and how do you really represent something like that, I guess is my question. And that might be for realtors out here that have more experience than me.
And we have a builder too.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was thinking about the question, the first question, like whether or not you have to. Well, I had to build a bridge on my property over a stream on my property, and they didn't look at it at all. They didn't, we built it as 20 times too big, but they didn't have to prove anything. I would be curious though, when you asked that question, I thought of the question, what if we had to attach to our public way? And, a lot of times there is some running water and you need that, whether it's a culvert or whatever. And I don't know if that's the highway department, the county road department, or whomever on that. But I don't know who would approve that, or there's probably nobody in this group, I would think, right?
I mean, normally it's divisional water, depending on the size of
And making the connection to the public road.
Right, or else just on your property when you cross. Good examples are like on Gunpowder is a good example.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Gunpowder Road's a good example. You have all those curb cuts, and each one has their own bridge, and some of those have to be replaced, and so they got permits to do that. So.
I have something to add to that. I just went through in Harrison County. I have a piece of property. Thank you. That it's the state road and then a creek and then the land. So I actually went through the state or the county road department. They had to do a speed test, and then I had to get approval from them. And then I go through the water, like the Kentucky Division of Water, to get a permit as well. But it also depends on, is it a county road, is it a state road? But a great place to start is going to be your county road department, because a lot of the counties will actually help pay to put that culvert in. But they all won't.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we are right up against 7 o'clock. Does anyone have a final, just real quick, anyone want to give a quick 2 cents in before we wrap up?
Never give a builder an opportunity to speak. Just real quick, on the back table there's a book, some copies of a book my son published on how to build a new home. Anybody's welcome to pick those up. They're also able to download off our website, and encourage everybody to continue the fine work you're doing and supporting our industry.
Awesome. With that, I want to say thank you again to Veronica, to Janie, for our local association for coordinating with NAR to receive this grant. Hopefully it's been beneficial for members and consumers alike. And I just want to say thank you to our panel. We appreciate that. Everyone's busy. We certainly appreciate you sharing your knowledge and information. And mingle, hang out. There's lots of resources. We've got some printed timelines and such. And then, of course, take a peek back there at the books as well. But thank you so much for being here. It was great.